Rod Granger was a 30-year-old businessman, pilot, and soon-to-be husband. In December of 2016, Rod had amassed 765 flying hours, 55 of those multi-engine, 37 of those multi-engine hours in his newly acquired Cessna T303 Crusader. The morning of the flight began on a happy note. Rod Granger, 30 years old, and his girlfriend Dawn Banks, who was 24 at the time, were finishing an early breakfast at Cincinnati's Lunken Airport with Rod's older brother Ken, and preparing strategies for the mega deal that Rod would be working on later that morning in Buffalo, New York. Two brothers had taken over their father's used machinery business earlier in the year, and were hoping that a large single lot of heavy-duty cutting tools would become available to fill an important order they had been working on. This one in Buffalo, which had cropped up just the night before, could be theirs because Rod was going to get there first, before other dealers even knew about it, thanks to the company airplane. Rod's first airplane was a Cessna Skyline, a great learning airplane but very limited as long-distance business tool. Next came a Cessna Centurion, because the FBO had done his homework and worked up a persuasive set of numbers showing why a faster, higher-flying machine was a better business tool. And now, he flew an all-weather, higher-altitude, fast-enough twin-engine Cessna T303 Crusader, safer, more reliable, and even better business tool. The weather forecasted from flight service was troubling, but it barely fazed Rod, a 765-hour instrument pilot who flew virtually every trip IFR. They were calling for moderately low ceilings leaving Cincinnati, tops at 15 to 16,000, winds aloft of no consequence. So far all is expected, but now a new wrinkle. Buffalo had a possibility of heavy lake snow and or freezing rain mixed with snow. Only a possibility, but if Rod had still been flying the Centurion, this would have been a scrub trip. Rod never took chances. He was as careful and as cautious as he was aggressive, a quality he had learned from his coaches while he was developing his running skills in college. The Crusader was going to prove itself on this trip, earn its keep, and help the Granger Machinery Company reach new heights in business efficiency. This was going to be its first venture into heavy weather, a test for pilot and machine of its new brand, known icing equipment. Rod, in particular, was going to get his first real taste of ice, something he had instinctively shied away from in his Skyline and Centurion. But the Crusader was equipped for ice, and he was confident of its capability. He was sure it was going to be a challenging flight and a brilliant business coup for him and Granger Machinery. Rod filed the 2-hour trip at 21,000 feet on Victor Airways to Youngstown, and then direct to Dunkirk and Victor 14 straight into Buffalo. Cincinnati was 400 feet overcast and 2.5 miles visibility. No problems along the route of flight until about 50 miles shy of Buffalo. Then it was going to be a toss-up, depending on what the surface winds did over Lake Erie. Snow, rain mixed with snow, all of the above, or nothing. He would know more over Youngstown and find out for sure over Dunkirk, VOR. It felt like a lucky day.
Hey, I was just looking for a weather brief for an IFR cross country. The call sign's November 851 Tango Bravo. Leaving Cincinnati approximately 15 Zulu, and we're en route to Buffalo.
Okay, leaving Cincinnati, you're going to have that overcast layer at 400 feet. Tops are forecasted at 16,000 feet. That's going to persist your whole flight into Buffalo there, and depending depending on what the surface winds are doing in Buffalo, you might expect some lake effect off Lake Erie. That might bring some freezing rain, some snow, and the possibility of some icing in there for you. Rod and Dawn took off from Lunken at 7:45 a.m., right on schedule, and were in the clouds at 400 feet, also right on schedule. Rod reported the cloud bases to departure and settled back for the 20-minute climb to on top at 16,000 feet. They actually broke out at 15,500 feet, and then continued climbing to their assigned altitude of flight level 210. For the next hour, 3 calls to Flight Watch confirmed that the weather in Buffalo was still a big if, but the surface winds were holding steady, 300 degrees at 12 knots. If they stayed that way, A-OK. No lake effect and less likelihood of serious problems when they arrived in another hour. Over Youngstown at flight level 210, 40 minutes ago, Cleveland Center announced the first inkling of trouble in Buffalo. The winds had shifted to 280 degrees and light to moderate snow was falling in the area east of Lake Erie. Rod and Dawn could see the heavier cloud buildup moving from left to right across their flight path, about 80 miles ahead of them. The Crusader's color radar confirmed what they were looking at. On his next handoff, Rod got an even clearer picture of the Buffalo weather. Not good. And that was told that as SIGMET was already in effect from Erie, Pennsylvania to northeast of Dunkirk, New York, along the southeastern shore of Lake Erie. He was also advised that Rochester, New York, about 45 air miles east of Buffalo, was a marginal VFR and expected to remain that way for at least another hour. It was decision time. Rod and Dawn checked the en route chart, the radar, and out the window and requested a deviation to the right to bring them over Jamestown, New York, and then on to the Cold intersection on Victor 33, and then direct from there to the Daly intersection on Victor 36. They were effectively staying southeast of the main weather on a straight line heading for Rochester. At either Cold or Daly, they would decide if they could make a run to the Greater Buffalo International Airport, only about 10 minutes from both intersections. Center cleared the Crusader as requested and soon afterward handed them off to Dunkirk Sector Controller on 125.0. Crusader 851 Tango Bravo, Cleveland Center. The SIGMET has just been extended to the Greater Buffalo area. You can remain at flight level 210 or descend to 6,000 after Jamestown. Your discretion, sir.
851 Tango Bravo will descend to 6 after Jamestown. Have you got any power-ups yet about icing?
Not yet, sir. The SIGMET just came out. So far, the airlines are still making it in okay. We've had a couple of smaller airplanes diverted east. Not much else going on in this area. It's been very low IFR all morning.
Okay. We'll take a look when we get to Cold. We're known icing equipped and should be able to make it in. Just coming up on Jamestown, out of 210 for 6,000.
Attention all aircraft, Cleveland Center. A SIGMET is in effect for moderate to severe icing in the clouds along the southeastern shore of Lake Erie from Erie, Pennsylvania, extending northeast to 10 miles east of Buffalo and north to Niagara Falls. Attention all aircraft. A SIGMET is in effect for moderate to severe icing in the clouds along the southeastern shore of Lake Erie from Erie, Pennsylvania, extending northeast to 10 miles east of Buffalo and north to Niagara Falls.
851 Tango Bravo is 5 from Cold, coming through 8,500. Wonder how conditions are holding up in Buffalo.
851 Tango Bravo, Cleveland Center. Greater Buffalo is reporting 401.5 miles. Snow starting to accumulate. Braking action on the runway is fair to good, according to a United 737 that landed 10 minutes ago. We also have 2 PIREPs of moderate icing up around the Niagara area, and several from Dunkirk on up to the Buffalo area. A Mooney landed with half-inch of rime at Orchard Park about 20 minutes ago. That's it so far. The airlines are still landing in Greater Buffalo, but the snow's starting to get heavy there.
Thanks for the report. Looks like we can take a shot at it after Cold. If it gets too bad, we know Rochester's holding, and only 15 minutes away. We're known icing equipped, so it shouldn't have too much trouble. And we've been in the clouds for the last 15 minutes and haven't picked up any ice at all.
851 Tango Bravo, okay. Descend to 4,000 and call Buffalo approach on 123.8. And you better get the ATIS first on 135.35. It's been changing every 10 minutes ago. Good day, sir. Arriving at Cold at 4,500 feet, Rod checked the wings for ice, just a trace of rime, and turned the windshield switch to on. He glanced at the ammeter as he did so, noticing the needle dip momentarily, verification that the windshield de-ice was operating. He repeated the procedure with the prop de-ice switch and double-checked the de-ice indicator needle. It was on too. Then he pushed the wing de-icer boot switch to full forward, looked out the window at the leading edge of the wing, and watched the boots inflate. The results pleased him. It was the first time he had ever turned on the de-ice system in flight, and he felt a surge of confidence that he and Don were now protected from the nasty ice. The system was working, but he never cycled the boots, and they remained inflated. Turning his attention back to the cold intersection and the radio, Rod called Buffalo Approach.
Buffalo Approach, Crusader, November 851 Tango Bravo 4000 with Papa. We're just crossing cold and picking up only a trace of rime, nothing serious so far.
851 Tango Bravo, Roger. Maintain 4000 for now. Turn right heading 030. We'll try to get you in as soon as possible. No other reported traffic. The SIGMET is still in effect, calling for moderate to severe icing in all sectors.
We got all the de-ice working, sir. Looks like it's taking care of itself.
November 851 Tango Bravo, you're 8 miles from Clump. Turn right heading 040 and descend to 2200. We'll be turning you in at about a mile outside the marker for a quick approach. The snow is getting heavier. Ceiling's down to about 250 and the visibility is just over a mile, maybe.
Okay, heading 040, note of 4 for 2.2, 851 Tango Bravo. Approach, we're having real ice problems here. Can't shake it all off. We'd like to go back up to 4,000 over to Rochester.
851 Tango Bravo, that's approved. Climb to 4,000, turn right heading 080, you're cleared direct Rochester. There was no reply. Rod was too busy. The Crusader was taking on more ice. Full power and they weren't climbing. They weren't maintaining altitude. The controls were sluggish. The airspeed was dropping, so was their Crusader. They were losing altitude, going out of control. They couldn't see through the heavy snow. The controls were limp. The engine was surging. Ron and Don were frantic, terrified, sensing catastrophe. They were going down and they were helpless. The final launching dive was relentless. The ground was unyielding as the Crusader went down nose first at a high speed. There was nothing left of anything or anyone. The airplane came down about a mile outside the little town of Depew that sits on Highway 20 junction. Flew right over the intersection and a big semi before it crashed. Just lucky it missed everything there. A lot of people would have been hurt or killed. Local police officer saw him go in. The other officer was at the crash in less than 5 minutes and on the way called the state police and they called us. Then they secured the area and did not let anybody touch anything before we could get our people there. That was about a half hour later. What we found was an airplane that went in literally head first, nose down at a high speed, and with about 2.5 inches of ice on what was left of the wings and tail. As a matter of fact, they were able to determine very positively that the wing boots had been left inflated, because the ice that was left on had formed on the contours of the inflated ridges. That was unusual. It either meant that the ice had formed fast that the boots got frozen in that position, or that the pilot screwed up and forgot to cycle the boots altogether. They couldn't verify which because the console that held the boot switch was crushed too badly and the whole assembly had been torn loose. Before we wrote up the report, we were in touch with the manufacturer of the wing de-ice system, and they told us that the boots could not have been frozen over like that if the pilot had cycled them at all, not just correctly. Those boots are obviously made to de-ice, not to attract and gather ice, and in the inflated position they were found in, it was worse than having no boots at all, because of what it did to the airflow and the lift under the wings. No airplane can fly like that, not even a jet. Another thing we were able to reconstruct from the radio transmissions was the pilot's attitude. He had the notion that his de-icing system could handle any icing, even severe. Now where he got that idea, we'll never know. Every manual that's put on the icing system says a SIGMET that says severe is to be taken seriously and avoided like it can kill you, because it can and it will. But this pilot figured he could handle it. So we had no choice. He was an excellent pilot and a well-equipped airplane. but he made a couple of critical mistakes, and that's a big part in the accident. But he shouldn't have been in the first place, and then when he saw the airplane icing up as fast as it apparently did, he should have been the hell out of there, lickety-split, climbing back up and out of the inversion. If he had done that as quickly as he should have, he and his girlfriend would have been sipping coffee in Rochester for an hour or so before flying back to Buffalo for whatever meeting it was they were in such a hurry to get to. You know, pilots in a hurry tend to make mistakes. In bad weather, they tend to make more mistakes. And in weather like that pilot flew into, they usually make deadly mistakes. We call them all pilot error, but accidents like this one should be called pilot in a hurry error. It ought to be a special category.
Did not just die in an airplane crash. He was murdered. The FAA murdered him. The manufacturer that was de-icing equipment murdered him. And the FBO who sold him the airplane and trained him to fly it murdered him. I'll take them one at a time so you get what I mean. I read the transcripts of the radio communications Rod had with the controllers. They knew damn well how dangerous de-icing was that day, especially the last two guys. But they never said so in any ways that any reasonable person could understand clearly and without question. They told him there was a SIGMET, a damn SIGMET. I've learned some of their fancy terms since the accident, but they also told him the airlines were still landing in Buffalo. Now what does that tell you? That the airplanes that are better equipped for bad weather flying were able to handle it? But they really knew it. They really knew different. So why didn't they just come out and say in damn plain and simple language, this area is closed. It's too dangerous for you to fly in it. We don't care what kind of airplane you have, you're flying, or how it's equipped. Get out of here and go somewhere else, or just stay home. If they were working for some highway patrol or state police, that's what they'd be saying on dozens of radio and TV stations. I know that had to be a fact because that is precisely what happened in Buffalo on that morning of the accident. And then the state police went on a giant step further than the FAA did by closing the I-90 and the rest of the Beltway for over half the day. The airport never shut down at all, not officially anyway, even though nothing moved there for most of the late morning. But to make it even worse, and much more like a murder plot, they cleared him into the area and approved his attempt to land, even though they knew he'd never made it yet. In other words, they lured him into a death trap. If I'm not mistaken, in the criminal justice system of the damn United States, that is frickin' murder.
I can't say much about this case because we've been advised that the pilot's family is bringing suit against us for misrepresenting the de-icing system that was sold to the pilot by one of our dealers. But I'm happy to share some general information with you. To begin with, all of our literature, manuals, spec sheets, and so forth state very clearly that none of our systems are designed to cope with severe icing. We do not know of any de-icing system, not even military hot wing systems, that can provide perfect protection in really severe icing conditions. In those very rare instances, the elements can overpower everything and everyone. As far as using our systems is concerned, everything about them is passive and self-controlled, except the boot cycling, which must be controlled manually by the pilot. There's a reason why this is a preferred method. It's because no two icing situations are ever the same, not even the momentary ones. The applications vary from cycle to cycle during the encounter. That's due to the variables of clouds and precipitation. Ice accumulates on 1 second by second basis and must be dislodged by inflating the boots after the ice builds up to an eighth or a quarter of an inch, about. Where the technique comes in, and it's really very simple to learn, is in judging the right amount of buildup. Doesn't involve any particular kind of skill either, just common sense. Most pilots master it easily after the first couple of cycles, which really boils down to a minute or two. Regarding so-called training on the use of de-icing system, it's really a misnomer. Reading any straightforward manual is usually adequate, and ours are certainly that because in many parts of the country it's no easy matter to find controllable conditions to practice in. Places like Tucson and Miami, for instance, would offer little or no opportunity for de-icing training. And in other places where icing conditions are available for at least part of the year, a flight instructor might be taking an unmeasurable risk by deliberately flying into known icing conditions just to practice. In that regard, let me leave you with this final bit of information. Anti-icing equipment is intended to protect an airplane primarily from unexpected icing encounters. It is not a license to take on all icing conditions. These two factors are communicated clearly to the general aviation community by us, by all of our counterparts in the de-icing equipment business, and, of course, by the FAA. As a result, we feel confident that every pilot who flies a known icing-equipped airplane understands its limitations completely.
When Ross Granger and Don Banks were killed in Buffalo, we lost a favorite employee, an important customer, and two very good friends. The Banks and Granger family have understandably been devastated by this tragedy, and our hearts certainly go out to them. You're probably aware that Ross' family, Willard Granger, is planning a legal action against us, claiming that we were responsible for what appears to be mishandling of the de-icing boots. Mr. Granger is claiming that we sold Ross the anti-icing system under false pretenses and then failed to demonstrate it properly. He's also claiming that we failed to deliver some free training that was supposedly included with the equipment package, but he hasn't defined his claims in writing yet or shown anything indicating that we were obligated to provide any specific training with the anti-icing package, free or otherwise. As a matter of fact, it's in the written statement we prepared for the FAA. Ross did receive quite a bit of a free training in connection with his multi-engine rating and the purchase of the Crusaders. Our chief pilot, Avery Judson, states in his own written report that he did not demonstrate the de-icing equipment to Rod because he had not been asked to do so. He also stated that there were no actual icing conditions in southwestern Ohio during July, August, and September while Ross was taking his training. Their last training flight was on September 28th. From what we were told by the FAA, problem with the de-icing system was probably only a minor contribution caused to the accident. The suddenness and the severity of the icing would have overwhelmed the boots no matter how they were applied, right or wrong. Ross and Don just never had a chance.
The facts, the circumstances, and the conclusions relating to this accident seem to be coming from different directions. For the record, it's difficult. It's not impossible to dispute the official findings. The pilot did make mistakes, so the pilot error label is definitely justified. The appearance of the ice on the leading edges of the wings was positive proof that the boots had been left inflated. That happened by itself, or because of a flaw in the boot system, however, is too remote to be considered possible. So improper use is certainly an appropriate call for the boot system. After that, the rest of the probable causes are just logical parts of the sequence leading to the crash. Why spatial disorientation got thrown in, I can't say, since the aircraft was pressurized and the toxicology tests were all negative. Maybe the investigators felt the pilot got so far behind his situation that he displayed signs of disorientation. Those would show up in the ATC transcripts, and I'd say are more a matter of subjective interpretation than provable fact. But the field investigators are encouraged to express their opinions. You'd understand why if you ever had to separate body parts from the airplane parts in order to conduct one of these investigations. It can do things to your head and your heart. The rest of this is strictly personal opinion. My first point of contention would be the pilot's preparation for the trip. From everything in the reports and the follow-ups, there wasn't anything unusual. I'd also say that the family's accusations are emotional rather than from factual. To take the position that a very qualified pilot knew nothing about how the de-ice system works is not believable. He did everything else too well and was much too thorough for that to be plausible. For sure, he would have read and understood what was the operating procedures for the system. Those instructions, by the way, are written very clearly and conform to all required standards. On the subject of the FPO performance, I'd say that their written statements, including the ones from the chief pilot, are true accounts of what occurred. You don't tend to work on de-icing techniques in midsummer. They also point out that the pilot was quick and conscientious learner, which would further confirm that most likely read about and understood the de-icing system. Moving on to the radio transcripts, we are now into a murky area. The center controllers definitely gave the pilot mixed signals about the conditions he would be flying into. They announced the SIGMET and told him that other aircraft had diverted, but then go on in the next breath, they added that the airlines were getting into Greater Buffalo and were reporting braking action without mentioning anything about icing on the way in. In a known ice airplane and with an important customer waiting at the destination airport, I think most self-conscientious pilots would lean towards "I can make it" rather than diverting. The approach controller had a better shot at sending the Crusader off to Rochester, but how was he supposed to know what the icing conditions actually were? He didn't have any PIREPs to go by, only the SIGMET, which he did announce, and empathetically. From that point on, his job was to respond to the pilot in command who knew much more about the circumstances and capabilities than the controller did. Which brings us to a crossroad on this whole subject of ATC responsibility. Should an area and an airport be shut down every time a SIGMET is issued for moderate to severe icing? The airlines say no because their pilot and their equipment are better prepared to deal with it. For most general aviation aircraft, it would definitely be logical to consider, but how would you implement something that would satisfy and intelligently protect both interests? And I'd also like to offer that contemplating a two-sided system where an area was closed just for general aviation aircraft would bring a firestorm of protests from the IOPA and the MPAA, Professional Pilots Association, and all of corporate America. Even if you are able to implement mandatory closings of areas and airports in connection with the SIGMETs, it could cause a worse problem. And because of the seriousness of its decision to issue a SIGMET, it's safe to assume that fewer of them would be issued, and that could be even more dangerous than the system we have now. So in conclusion, I would say that this accident was caused by one of those once-in-a-blue-moon crazy weather events that no one could have predicted with certainty. Not unlike a microburst or clear turbulence or a lightning strike. The pilot and his passengers simply ran out of luck, and I don't believe that pilot air played any significant part in causing this accident. But again, that's strictly my personal opinion.